Lord of the Flies, Chapter 3, Huts on the Beach. Jack was bent double. He was down like a sprinter, his nose only a few inches from the humid earth. The tree trunks and the creepers that festooned them lost themselves in a green dusk 30 feet above him, and all about was the undergrowth. There was only the faintest indication of a trail here, a cracked twig, and what might be the impression of one side of a hoof. He lowered his chin and stared at the traces as though he would force them to speak to him. Then, dog-like, uncomfortably, on all fours, yet unheeding his discomfort, he stole forward 5 yards and stopped. Here was a loop of creeper with a tendril pendant from a node. Okay, so just to give you a quick idea, Jack, they compare him to a sprinter at the beginning, because you know how sprinters are down low, right, down to the ground and ready to go. So that's what he looks like. He's hunting right now. The tendril was polished on the underside. Pigs passing through the loop brushed it with their bristly hide. Jack crouched his face a few inches away from this clue, then stared forward into the semi-darkness of the undergrowth. His sandy hair, considerably longer than it had been when they dropped in, was lighter now, and his bare back was a mass of dark freckles and peeling sunburn. A sharpened stick about 5 feet long trailed from his hand, and except for a pair of tattered shorts held up by his knife belt, he was naked. He closed his eyes, raised his head, and breathed in gently with flared nostrils, assessing the current of warm air for information. The forest and he were very still. At length, he let out his breath in a long sigh and opened his eyes. They were bright blue, eyes that in this frustration seemed bolting and nearly mad. He passed his tongue across dry lips and scanned the uncommunicative forest. Then again he stole forward and cast this way and that over the ground. The silence of the forest was more oppressive than the heat, and at this hour of the day there was not even the whine of insects. Only when Jack himself roused a gaudy bird from a primitive nest of sticks was the silence shattered and the echo set ringing by a harsh cry that seemed to come out of the abyss of ages. Jack himself shrank at this cry with a hiss of indrawn breath, and for a minute became less a hunter than a furtive thing, ape-like among the tangle of trees. Then the trail, the frustration, claimed him again, and he searched the ground avidly. By the trunk of a vast tree that grew pale flowers on its gray bark, he checked, closed his eyes, and once more drew in the warm air. And this time his breath came short. There was even a passing pallor in his face. And then the surge of blood again. He passed like a shadow under the darkness of the trees and crouched, looking down at the trodden ground at his feet. The droppings were warm. Okay, so that's from the pigs. So he is trying to find these pigs, and you can tell he's pretty fierce, but he's also very scared. They lay piled among turned earth. They were olive green, smooth, and they steamed a little. Jack lifted his head and stared at the inscrutable masses of creeper that lay across the trail. Then he raised his spear and sneaked forward. Beyond the creeper, the trail joined a pig run that was wide enough and trodden enough to be a path. So we don't have any paths here because people are not here, but he has managed to find a path where the pigs go through. The ground was hardened by an accustomed tread, and as Jack rose to his full height, he heard something moving on it. He swung back his right arm and hurled the spear with all his strength. From the pig run came the quick, hard patter of hooves, a castanet sound, seductive, maddening, the promise of meat. He rushed out of the undergrowth and snatched up his spear. The pattering of the pigs' trotters died away in the distance. Jack stood there streaming with sweat, streaked with brown earth, stained by all the vicissitudes of a day's hunting. Swearing, he turned off the trail and pushed his way through until the forest opened a little, and instead of bald trunks supporting a dark roof, there were light gray trunks and crowns of feathery palm. Beyond these was the glitter of the sea, and he could hear voices. Ralph was standing by a contraption of palm trunks and leaves, a rude shelter that faced the lagoon and seemed very near to falling down. He did not notice when Jack spoke. "Got any water?" Ralph looked up, frowning from the complication of leaves. He did not notice Jack even when he saw him. "I said, have you got any water? I'm thirsty." Ralph withdrew his attention from the shelter and realized Jack with a start. "Oh, hello. Water? There by the tree. Ought to be some left." Jack took up a coconut shell that brimmed with fresh water from among a group that was arranged in the shade and drank. The water splashed over his chin and neck and chest. He breathed noisily when he had finished. "Needed that." Simon spoke from inside the shelter. "Up a bit." Ralph turned to the shelter and lifted a branch with a whole tilling of leaves. The leaves came apart and fluttered down. Simon's contrite face appeared in the hole. "Sorry." Ralph surveyed the wreck with distaste. "Never get it done." He flung himself down at Jack's feet. Simon remained looking out of the hole in the shelter. Once down, Ralph explained. "Been working for days now, and look, 2 shelters were in position but shaky. This one was a ruin, and they kept running off. You remember the meeting? How everyone was going to work hard until the shelters were finished? Except me and my hunters. Except the hunters. Well, the little ones are," he gesticulated, sought for a word, "they're hopeless. The older ones aren't much better. Do you see? All day I've been working with Simon, no one else. They're off bathing or eating or playing." Simon poked his head out carefully. "You're the chief. You tell them off." Ralph lay flat and looked up at the palm trees and the sky. "Meetings. Don't we love meetings? Every day, twice a day, we talk." He got on one elbow. "I bet if I blew the conch this minute, they'd come running. Then we'd be, very solemn, and someone would say we ought to build a jet or a submarine or a TV set. When the meeting was over, they'd work for 5 minutes, then wander off or go hunting." Jack flushed. "We want meat." "Well, we haven't got any yet, and we want shelters. Besides, the rest of your hunters came back hours ago. They've been swimming." "I went on," said Jack. "I let them go. I had to go on." He tried to convey the compulsion to track down and kill that was swallowing him up. "I went on. I thought by myself." The madness came into his eyes again. "I thought I might kill." "But you didn't." "I thought I might." Some hidden passion vibrated in Ralph's voice. "But you haven't yet." His invitation might have passed as casual were it not for the undertone. "You wouldn't care to help with the shelters, I suppose." "We want meat, and we don't get it." Now the antagonism was audible. "But I shall, next time. I've got to get a barb on this spear. We wounded a pig, and the spear fell out. If we could only make barbs, we need shelters." Suddenly Jack shouted in rage, "Are you accusing?" "All I'm saying is we've worked dashed hard, that's all." They were both red in the face and found looking at each other difficult. Ralph rolled on his stomach and began to play with the grass. "If it rains like when we dropped in, we'll need shelters all right. And then another thing, we need shelters because of the..." He paused for a moment, and they both pushed their anger away. Then he went on with the safe change subject. "You've noticed, haven't you?" Jack put down his spear and squatted. "Noticed what?" "Well, they're frightened. He rolled over and peered into Jack's fierce, dirty face. I mean, the way things are, they dream. You can hear 'em. Have you been awake at night? Jack shook his head. They'll talk and scream, the little ones, even some of the others, as if it wasn't a good island. Astonished at the interruption, they looked up at Simon's serious face. As if, said Simon, the beastie or the snake thing was real. Remember?